Hey everybody, welcome to the diary. It's a quick one today. We're just going to do one of our phone calls we've been waiting to answer. Okay, so we're going to get right into this one because I think it's an interesting question. Here you go. Check it out.
This is for the diary. I just listened to the episode where you're talking with your Korean brother, Matt. And I'm curious, how did your parents decide, or why did they decide to adopt Korean kids or kids in general? I understand you have at least one blood sister. Could your parents not have any more children? Thanks. Love the show.
All right. So it's a great question. And I've answered this in other places, but but it's not easy to catch it wherever I said it. I don't even remember where I've said it before. Maybe a whole other show. But anyway, yeah, so let's answer the last thing first. Like why adopt at all? You know, I got my sister Wendy, my older brother Mark, although he's from a different dad, but you know, why not more of that? It's because my mom had constant, well, I shouldn't say constant. It's not like it was 24/7, but she had a lot of miscarriages. Something like, I think between Mark and I, my brother Mark and I, it was like 10 miscarriages. And they'd almost given up. In fact, I was a bit of a fluke. It was like, well, we're about done here. Oh, one more came. Okay, cool. And then it was like, well, let's try to have some more. They wanted to have a bigger family. And so they attempted to do more kids and more miscarriages, just one after the other. So they got to a point where it was just like, this isn't healthy for my mom. This isn't healthy for the family. You know, what are we doing here? And they got this idea that, well, maybe we should adopt. And one of the things that was going on at the time, South Korea was not the financial, juggernaut that it is today. I mean, really anything prior to the 86 Olympics or so, things were pretty, not impoverished. It's not the right word, but South Korea is not what it is today. They've really gone places, and Korean culture is everywhere now with K-pop, and food is huge, and like all that stuff is like a whole new world. But back then, this just wasn't the case, and for whatever reason, South Korea was a popular place to go to for adoptions or to sponsor kids and then possibly adopt them. They had a lot of kids in their orphanage system over there, and culturally, if you had no parents and were brought up in an orphanage, especially if you were a girl, you were just considered refuse from the society. You were not, there was no respect for that. So you had kind of 3 or 4 negative things happening at once that contributed to kind of a problem over there. So I don't know the exact details as to why the temperature over here was, hey, we need to adopt from Korea. But in my family's case, they glommed onto that movement. And there was a lot of it at the time. We run into families all the time now. They're like, "Oh yeah, my neighbor, they had 3 adopted kids or 2 adopted kids too, and they were all from Korea." Or my friend I went to high school or college with was adopted, and they all came around that same era of time, like late 70s, early 80s. And it was just a thing, right? I don't even think it's a thing now. I don't think you can even sponsor a kid over there now. But it was a thing. So that's where they landed. And they were like, well, all right, let's do that. So they started with my sister, Misha. And she was an infant left on a bus somewhere. And we adopted her, got her over here. And she was malnourished and had all kinds of issues. But we fattened her up real good. And I got those American carbs in her, and she did fine. But she, for all intents and purposes, grew up here. She never knew Korean, and she doesn't have any cultural ties there. So that went well, and they were like, well, my mom's continually having more of these failed pregnancies. So they did it again, and they sponsored my sister Tara, who came over also as an infant. I don't remember her exact story, although she did a genetic test recently and found out that she is not Korean, which we always suspected. She was in Korea. That's where we got her from. But it turns out she's from Vietnam, and she had somehow gotten smuggled or taken over there and left there. So that was weird. But anyway, we just found that recently, actually. But it kind of makes sense. She's got a different, I don't know, look to her. I don't know, something about her that always seemed like, are we sure she's, we just didn't know. Anyway, she was adopted as a baby, and meanwhile, they're still trying to have kids, but it's not working. And then they start sponsoring my brother. And at the time, you weren't supposed to be able to have two or more than two. And we may have talked about this with Matt on that episode. I don't remember if we did, but you're only supposed to have two. There was a limit or something, arbitrary, some kind of limit. And my parents went straight to Jake Garn, at the time, one of the senators here, Utah senators. And he was very sympathetic to their request to get another visa going, and somehow pushed something through that made it so they could do it. So that's how we got 3. Now, while Matt was being sponsored, not here yet, but just the sponsorship thing's a different thing. You send money, they send back pictures of how it's going. It's sort of I don't know what you call it. We just call it sponsoring. I don't know what else you call that. My sister, Wendy, out of nowhere, completely against all odds, is born. And at that point, they weren't even really trying. Like, the doctor's like, there's no way you're pregnant. And she sure enough was. And that she's just a complete fluke, a wonderful fluke, but a fluke nonetheless. And so she's born during that time. But we're like, well, we're still getting Matt. We're still bringing him over, although his name was Lee Sung-soo at the time. So we now we got, 4 of us, whatever it is. 5 if you count my brother, although he's 10 years older than me, so he's in college by now. Or ish, something like that. Anyway, so then Matt comes over, and that's it. So that's the deal. It was really just about my mom's just constant miscarrying. She just, just issues. I don't know if today they would have been able to diagnose it better or whatever, but you're talking about the 60s and early 70s. It's difficult to say whether we had the wherewithal to know why it wasn't sticking, but it was pretty hard for her. A couple of those, like the one right before me, the pregnancy right before I was born, she carried a baby to 7 months. It died. The fetus died at 7 months, and then 2 full months she had to carry basically a stillborn baby. And she had to give birth to it. And I don't remember if we were getting a girl or a boy, if we had any other info than that. I just remember it being really traumatic for my mom. I wasn't there, obviously, but stories and stuff. But anyway, and I think there were a couple of those kind of gnarly, like, okay, we're going to make it. And then it didn't work out. And they were very scared about Wendy and it not working, but it did. In Wendy's case, though, it's funny because she was, at about 7 or so years old, she got really sick, and everybody thought it was an appendix. So they took her in, had her appendix open, and they went, wait, her appendix is fine. Something else is going on in here. And they found one of her ovaries was taken over by, she's only 7 years old, is taken over by a what would have been her twin. It was an underdeveloped twin that never took in the womb, which is kind of crazy. My mom wasn't on any kind of special fertility or anything. It was just a thing that happened, and it never evolved past that. But it had like hair and teeth. Don't picture like a little chompy monster or anything, but there were like genetic things happening with this little tumor ball that were basically the genetics of a person trying to come out. So you had teeth, not material. What do you call that? Teeth, whatever. Hair, I think there was maybe even like the start of an ear or something like that. Something weird like that. I used to tease her and tell her she had a mad ball in there, but I guess if you didn't grow up in the 80s, you don't even know what a mad ball is. But anyway, so they took that out, and she had to have her ovary removed. So then you have this whole new fear of like, well, when she gets older, if she wants to have kids, what's that going to mean? 1 ovary? Can you even do it? Turns out she can. She had 4 kids. They're all great, wonderful kids. But yeah, she was a complete freak occurrence. That was not expected to happen on any level, and it did. And so as a result, one big happy family with a lot of diversity in it, and I loved growing up in a family that was different. I learned a lot of lessons from that. Some good, or mostly good, some kind of bad about how society sometimes treats people who look different, especially when you're kids. That was hard to see, but it was good for me to see that stuff early. I think I understood prejudice, and I understood irrational fear more than other kids my age because of that stuff. Hard to say. That's just kind of the vibe I came away with. So anyway, that's it. That's the story. That's why we adopted, and why we adopted where we adopted. And I'm really glad we did, because I can't imagine my life without these Korean goofball siblings. It was great. It was a great way to grow up, and I love my siblings, and we're all very close, and there is little doubt that we saved. Well, I shouldn't say we don't have a savior complex, but we basically saved the three Korean siblings from pretty miserable lives. Society had rejected them. They were not going to have much opportunity where they were. And probably wouldn't live long. They weren't known for living much past certain. They had a really low life expectancy over there at the time. Like I say, things are very different now. It's not what it was. I'm sure there's still some cultural issues, but I don't think it's what it was at all. Korea's come a very long way. And yeah, that's it. I hope that answers your question. I like these kind of questions. Keep them coming. 801-471-0462. That's where that voicemail happened. You can also do text. That's fine too. Happy to read those. And we'll do another one on an upcoming episode. Hope you're all doing grand and having a fantastic day. Might we all talk again soon is my hope. We'll see you later.